Alright everyone, settle in. Tonight, we journey back thousands of years to the banks of the Nile, to a civilization famous for its pyramids, pharaohs, and ever-watchful gods. But beneath the golden masks and grand temples lies a much harsher reality. Today, we're exploring what would truly happen if you spent just one day in ancient Egypt. Because, let me tell you, the sun isn't the only thing capable of roasting you alive. So, before you get too comfortable, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely appreciate what I'm creating here. And I'd love to know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always genuinely fascinating to see our audience connecting from all corners of the globe. Now, dim those lights, perhaps switch on a fan for that gentle background hum, and let's smoothly transition into tonight's journey together. Welcome to ancient Egypt, the land of pyramids, gods, and relentless ultraviolet intensity. Before you even open your eyes, the sun is already blasting through your reed hut, as if auditioning for the role of unforgiving sky god. There are no curtains, no shades, and certainly no air conditioning. Just the raw, unforgiving heat of the desert, thoroughly baking everything, including you, by breakfast. You're lying on a straw mat with a linen sheet that offers more of a suggestion than actual protection. That refreshing Nile breeze you were promised in all those travel documentaries? Yeah, it's long gone, likely having perished sometime around 2800 BC. By the time you stumble outside, the temperature is already flirting with 90 degrees Fahrenheit, or approximately 32 degrees Celsius. And it's not even mid-morning. The sun doesn't just shine in ancient Egypt. It attacks. Your linen tunic? Useless. It's akin to wearing tissue paper in a sauna. And don't even think about sunscreen. There's no aloe vera, no SPF 50, not even a floppy hat with a logo from a beach resort. Ancient Egyptians did possess protective oils, but unless you're wealthy or work in a temple, you won't be getting any. Your best option? Smear yourself with mud or crocodile dung, which apparently might keep you from turning into a human torch. Emphasis on might. By midday, the stones beneath your feet are hot enough to cook lentils. Shade is a luxury. Trees are rare. You might find a little relief hiding behind a mud brick wall, but even that wall is sweating by now. You, on the other hand, appear as though someone tossed you into a clay oven and forgot to set a timer. And you had better not complain. Ra, the sun god, is watching. And in ancient Egypt, the sun wasn't just weather. It was divine authority. The hotter the day, the more powerful Ra was presumed to be feeling. So basically, if you're melting, consider it a spiritual compliment. In short, surviving one day in ancient Egypt demands hydration, humility, and an ironclad tolerance for feeling like a roast chicken. And this is just the morning. You're finally out of bed, or rather, off your scratchy straw mat. And the good news is the Nile is just a short walk away. The bad news? You can already smell it before you even see it. Yes, the mighty Nile, the life-giver of ancient Egypt, revered as sacred, the very reason this civilization exists. But let's be honest. It also smells like a fish market had a bad breakup with a swamp. The banks are teeming with flies, frogs, and things that probably shouldn't have legs, but inexplicably do. Still, this is where you bathe. Soap hasn't been invented yet, and even if it had, you couldn't afford it. Instead, you lather yourself in the freshest cleansing technology of the day, sand. That's right. Exfoliation the Egyptian way. Just rub yourself down with coarse grains and consider it your skincare routine. It's like nature's sandpaper, but considerably less effective. Washing clothes is also done in the Nile. And by washing, we mean pounding them against rocks while fervently praying that a crocodile doesn't mistake your laundry for a tasty midday snack. Oh, and just to make things more enjoyable, let's not forget the occasional sewage runoff from upstream. Remember, people, livestock, and the occasional funeral boat all share this river. And yet, somehow, this is considered clean. You scrub, rinse, and emerge feeling slightly less sticky and only moderately more concerned about leeches. If you're a city dweller in Memphis or Thebes, you might be fortunate enough to use a public basin or cistern, but for everyone else, it's the Nile or nothing. And don't anticipate privacy. This is a communal bathing space, shared by families, neighbors, livestock, and the occasional ibis pecking around your ankles as if it pays rent. Water jars are filled and balanced on heads, then carried back to your mud brick house before the midday heat transforms the clay into toast. It's a daily ritual. Spiritual, essential, and slightly traumatic. So yes, the Nile is sacred. It sustains you, cleanses you, and quenches your thirst. But let's not pretend it's a sparkling oasis. In reality, it's part miracle, part biohazard, and it's all you've got. By now, you've bathed in the crocodile-infested Nile, you've sandpapered yourself semi-clean, and your body feels like a baked figure. Time for breakfast. The most important and least glamorous meal of your ancient Egyptian day. Let's manage expectations. There are no eggs Benedict, no fruit bowls, and absolutely no iced lattes. Breakfast in ancient Egypt is less of a culinary event and more of a tactical refueling operation. You sit on a low stool if you happen to have one, or simply squat in the corner like everyone else. The centerpiece of your meal? Bread. Lots of it. Dense, coarse, and often as unappetizingly chewy as a leather sandal. It's made from emmer wheat or barley and baked in clay ovens that may or may not be shared by the local rat population. And don't be surprised if there's sand in your slice. Not as a topping, just an unwelcome ingredient from the grinding stones. A daily dose of minerals, one might say. Then comes the beer. But don't get excited. This isn't crisp, bubbly craft ale. This is thick, cloudy, lukewarm liquid bread. More akin to porridge than a pint. It's calorie-dense and vaguely fermented. A medieval smoothie with the faint taste of sour cereal and sheer survival. Even children drink it. Not to be edgy, but because it's often safer than water. At least the brewing process boils out the parasites, unlike the Nile, which, as we just discussed, is essentially a petri dish. If you're lucky, and we mean very lucky, you might get an onion or a few dried dates to accompany your carbon foam concoction. Protein? Only if someone caught a fish and didn't immediately consume it raw. And as you chew your rock-like loaf and sip your grain sludge, flies buzz around you as if it's a buffet, because for them, it is. You swat at them with one hand, hold your cup with the other, and try not to dwell too much on the fact that this is likely the best meal you'll consume all day. Breakfast in ancient Egypt isn't about flavor. It's about function. It fuels your body just enough to survive until the next time someone hands you another sand-infused brick of bread.
Bon appétit.
You've consumed your gritty bread, your chunky beer, and just enough rest to consider yourself functional. Now it's time to work. And trust me, ancient Egyptian labor makes modern burnout seem like a luxurious spa day. Unless you're a scribe, a priest, or royalty, which, let's be honest, you are not, your job is pure muscle and dust. No air-conditioned cubicle, no coffee breaks, no ergonomic chairs. Just sweat, sand, and a constant risk of collapsing before noon. If you're a farmer, you'll be ankle-deep in Nile mud by sunrise, yanking weeds or planting barley under the watchful eye of an overseer whose main hobby appears to be yelling. You utilize wooden plows, crude sickles, and your bare hands. If your back aches, congratulations, that signifies it's working. If you're a laborer, things become even more biblically arduous. Imagine hauling multi-ton stones for temple construction under a blazing sun, while barefoot, up ramps made of gravel and prayer. There's no OSHA here. You trip? That results in a broken ankle and a shrug from the foreman. Working on tombs? That's an entirely different level of grind. You're hammering limestone, chiseling out burial chambers for individuals who will rest longer than you ever will. And if you mess up a pharaoh's tomb, let's just say job security might involve a sealed chamber and a curse. And if you're a woman, you're not exempt. Domestic work also constitutes intense physical labor. Grinding grain, hauling water, weaving linen, caring for children, and still assisting in the fields. Your break occurs when the baby naps for 7 minutes. While preparing dinner, you eat on the go. You wipe sweat with your tunic. You keep moving because slowing down means falling behind. And falling behind means someone else receives your grain quota and you receive the blame. There's no clocking out. The sun is your supervisor. When it finally sinks behind the horizon, you crawl home half alive, dust-caked, and dreaming of softer sandals and a less aggressive sun god. Work in ancient Egypt isn't just hard. It's relentless. It's a full-body commitment to survival, day after day, until your body gives out or your overseer decides you're not worth feeding. And that's not even the worst of it. After toiling your soul out in the fields or quarry, you might be tempted to grumble. Perhaps something small, a little. This job stinks. Or, why am I doing this again? Stop right there. Because in ancient Egypt, complaining isn't just frowned upon. It's potentially treason. Why? Because your boss isn't merely a ruler. He's a literal god. The pharaoh isn't some individual who was elected or born into a fortunate family. He's the human embodiment of Horus, son of Ra, chosen by the heavens to rule over Egypt and maintain Ma'at, divine, cosmic order. In other words, if the river floods well this year, thank the pharaoh. If it doesn't, well, perhaps you didn't pray hard enough. Questioning his authority isn't just rude, it's blasphemy. Speaking ill of him could result in a date with a whip, a set of shackles, or an early trip to the underworld without any of your favorite burial goods. You see his face everywhere. On statues, temple walls, coins, even bread molds. His name is chanted in rituals. His image is depicted larger than everyone else's in every mural. That's not artistic exaggeration. That's law. And don't expect to ever see him. If you're a commoner, the closest you'll get is observing a golden bark float by during a religious festival. Blink and he's gone. Back to a palace you'll never enter, surrounded by officials, guards, scribes, and enough gold to finance a small civilization, which, fun fact, he essentially does. If you're fortunate enough to work on a royal project, say a tomb, a temple, or a statue the size of a mountain, you serve with divine joy. At least that's what the state proclaims. You repeat it too, because pretending you're honored to carve stone for 14 hours a day is safer than the alternative. And don't even think about rebellion. Pharaohs crush uprisings faster than you can utter. Dynasty. Just ask the last village that attempted to withhold taxes. Oh wait, you can't. It no longer exists. So yes, the pharaoh is divine. And you're just lucky to be allowed to sweat in his name. Now get back to work. If you thought surviving under the scorching sun was difficult, just wait until you realize that in ancient Egypt, sand is your roommate, co-worker, seasoning, and mortal enemy. It's everywhere. In your clothes, in your bed, in your food. There is no escaping it. You could be working, praying, sleeping, or simply minding your own business in the market. And suddenly a gust of hot wind sweeps by, transforming your face into a grainy exfoliation experiment you never requested. Let's begin with your attire. You wear linen. It's light, breathable, and about as effective at keeping sand out as a screen door is at holding back soup. It infiltrates your tunic, adheres to your skin, and somehow finds its way into places you didn't even know had creases. Eating? Good luck. Every loaf of bread is essentially a sand trap. Since flour was ground between stone slabs, tiny bits of grit inevitably made their way into the dough. Egyptians didn't just consume their wheat, they also consumed their millstones. This explains why ancient dental remains are often worn flat like river rocks. Imagine chewing your breakfast while simultaneously filing your molars daily. And if you believed your house was a sand-free zone, think again. Your mud-brick home features gaps, crevices, and windows devoid of glass. Perfect portals for wind-blown sand. Your floors are covered, your cooking pots are full, and your bed is basically a sandpit disguised as furniture. Shoes are optional at best. Most Egyptians walked barefoot, meaning you're always one step away from transforming your feet into battered leather sandals. If you do possess footwear, it's usually a basic pair of sandals crafted from reeds. Fashionable, perhaps. Protective? Not remotely. Then there are sandstorms, Egypt's version of a divine slap. Sudden, swirling, blinding. One moment you're conversing with a friend. The next, you're spitting dust and feeling as though someone has emptied an entire beach into your eye sockets. Visibility plummets to zero, and everyone around you becomes a vaguely coughing silhouette. In short, sand is the roommate who never leaves, the spice in every meal, and the silent adversary of your eyes, lungs, and dignity. It's not just the backdrop of your life. It's now an integral part of your body. And no, you can't simply wash it off. You already attempted that in the Nile, which is probably saturated with even more sand. In ancient Egypt, religion isn't just a weekend pastime. It's the fundamental operating system for everything. Your job, your diet, your hygiene routine, your bedtime rituals, all are meticulously dictated by gods who appear to hold very specific opinions. First, comprehend this. The gods are omnipresent. Your town boasts temples dedicated to a dozen different deities, each responsible for some vital function. There's Ra, who navigates the sun across the sky as if it were a divine Uber. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, oversees scribes and moon calendars. Sobuk, part crocodile, part pure nightmare fuel, guards the Nile. And Batet, the graceful cat goddess, essentially manages public relations. Forget personal freedom, your daily routine revolves around appeasing them. Wake up, thank Ra, spill some beer, apologize to Hathor, stabiurtoe, curse quietly, or risk attracting a vengeful spirit with a grudge. Before meals, you offer a portion of food to the gods. Before bed, you pray that Set, the unpredictable god of chaos, doesn't plunge your house into existential disarray overnight. Even funerals are multi-day affairs where the deceased must pass rigorous tests, evade menacing demons, and prove their moral uprightness, or risk eternal erasure. Speaking of the afterlife, ancient Egyptians took it very seriously. You don't simply die and move on. You must successfully navigate a judgment process involving your heart being weighed against a feather of truth. If your heart proves heavier due to lies, cruelty, or perhaps stealing someone's goat, you are consumed by Ammit, a terrifying creature with the head of a crocodile, the body of a lion, and the legs of your worst nightmare. So yes, even in death, you're still on probation. But here's the twist. This complex belief system isn't inherently depressing. It's deeply comforting. Egyptians believed life was an integral part of a cosmic balance. And if you meticulously followed the rituals and upheld Ma'at, the principle of truth and order, you had a legitimate chance at a peaceful eternity, complete with food, family, and perhaps a boat. Of course, the wealthier you were, the more the gods seemed to notice you. Temples were monumental, priests wielded immense power, and peasants? Well, they simply hoped the gods were feeling generous on any given day. Because in ancient Egypt, faith isn't optional. It's your job description, your insurance plan, and your travel itinerary for the next life. So you've stepped on something sharp, been bitten by something strange, or contracted something contagious, which in ancient Egypt is basically just a Tuesday. Time to seek medical attention. Just don't anticipate a waiting room or a sterile environment. You're about to experience healing through a combination of spells, herbs, and sheer optimism. First, you'll be taken to a doctor. And to be fair, they were among the most advanced in the ancient world. They possessed surgical tools, medical texts, and a decent understanding of anatomy. But here's the catch. Science in ancient Egypt always came with a heavy dose of magic. You're given a poultice concocted from honey, moldy bread, and crushed herbs. Honey is, in fact, antibacterial, and mold possesses early penicillin properties, so it works to a certain extent. But before applying it, the healer will intone a protective spell, just to be on the safe side. Because you never truly know when your stomach cramps are actually the result of a spiteful ghost or an angry god. Have a headache? You might receive a dose of crushed onions rubbed into your scalp while someone recites a hymn to Thoth. Lung problems? Let's try smearing cow dung mixed with dates on your chest and observe the outcome. Eye infection? Time for a paste of lizard blood, ochre, and beer, accompanied by a prayer to Horus. Surgery? It did occur occasionally. Abscesses were drained, bones were set, and wounds were stitched with linen thread. But there's no anesthesia. Just a sharp knife and a friend to hold your shoulders down while you scream into a mud brick pillow. Dentistry? Not ideal. Remember all that sand in the bread? Your teeth are likely worn down by your 20s. If one becomes infected, your options are 1. Endure it, 2. Succumb to it, or 3. Have it extracted with something resembling pliers crafted by a blacksmith with low standards. And let's not overlook the amulets. Whether you're giving birth, getting stitched up, or simply sneezing too loudly, a competent doctor/priest will probably hang a charm around your neck. Just in case, the real issue is an invisible serpent spirit coiled around your spleen. So yes, Egyptian medicine had its moments, but primarily you'd better believe in the gods because your band-aid is literally a prayer. Here's a plot twist most people don't anticipate. Ancient Egyptian women possessed more rights than many women in later civilizations. They could own property, operate businesses, initiate divorce proceedings, and even pursue legal action against a man in court. Sounds incredibly progressive, right? But before you pack your bags for a time-traveling girl-boss vacation, hold on a moment. Because while the legal status might impress you, the day-to-day reality was far from glamorous. If you're a woman in ancient Egypt, you likely awaken before sunrise. You're grinding grain by hand, using a colossal flat stone that wears down both the wheat and your own spine. Then it's off to haul water from the Nile, prepare breakfast, care for children, manage the household, feed animals, and, if required, assist in the fields. You are essentially a one-woman workforce clad in linen. There's no me time, no spa days, and absolutely no maternity leave. Childbirth is inherently risky and agonizing. Midwives are certainly helpful, but there are no epidurals, no disinfectants, and no push playlists featuring soothing harps. You give birth in a hot room filled with incense and prayers, and hopefully without excessive bleeding. Let's discuss fashion. Linen dresses are light and breathable, but there's no underwear and no shoes. The sun scorches your skin, the ever-present sand grinds into everything, and the bugs view you as an all-you-can-eat buffet. Desire makeup? Great. Egyptian women did wear cosmetics, but it's lead-based and applied with sticks that bear a suspicious resemblance to toothpicks. Now, if you're fortunate enough to be born into a wealthy family, conditions are considerably better. You might learn to read and write, manage estate accounts, or even become a priestess. If you're born into royalty, you could even ascend to the position of pharaoh, like Hatshepsut or Cleopatra, who ruled with brilliance and strikingly terrifying eyeliner. But if you're poor, your status may be legally recognized, but your reality is physically demanding. You work, sweat, bend, carry, give birth, bury, and pray. You're not legally constrained, but your life is defined by survival. Still, Egyptian women possessed agency, and that was profoundly significant. They could speak in court, retain their inheritance, and were not considered property upon marriage. Compared to many ancient societies, this was a monumental advancement. So yes, Egyptian women had rights, but comfort, that was reserved for statues and goddesses, not for the woman elbow-deep in dough while swatting flies away from a toddler. You've somehow survived another grueling day in ancient Egypt. You've consumed your gritty bread, hauled your buckets, narrowly avoided divine wrath, and perhaps even dodged a sandstorm. Time to relax, right? Wrong. Because in ancient Egypt, your true test commences after you die. Death isn't the end. It's merely the beginning of an incredibly bureaucratic, multi-phase journey through the underworld. And if you thought the labor overseer was strict, just wait until you encounter the gods of judgment. First, your soul embarks on a journey to the Hall of Ma'at. Here, before a tribunal of 42 deities, you must loudly proclaim your innocence in what is essentially the oldest legal deposition in recorded history. You declare statements such as, "I did not steal, I did not lie, I did not covet my neighbor's donkey," all while fervently hoping the gods accept your assertions. Then comes the pivotal heart test. Literally, your heart, believed to be the very seat of the soul, is meticulously placed on a scale opposite the feather of Ma'at, the sacred symbol of truth, justice, and cosmic balance. If your heart proves heavier than the feather, it signifies you've led a wicked life. Enter Ammit, part lion, part crocodile, part hippo. She is entirely terrifying. She doesn't arrest you. She doesn't fine you. She devours your soul, destroying it forever. No afterlife, no second chances, just eternal non-existence, which, in a culture obsessed with eternity, represents the ultimate punishment. And it gets even more precarious. You can doom yourself not only by your actions, but by your words. One wrong confession, one forgotten line during your judgment, and boom, spiritual obliteration. It's like an open book test where failure results in being devoured by a mythological death hybrid. If you do pass, congratulations. You earn entry into the field of reeds, a serene, idealized version of Egypt where your soul lives eternally with abundant food, family, and presumably fewer sand fleas. But the stakes are enormous. That's why Egyptians meticulously prepared their tombs, performed elaborate funeral rites, and diligently studied magical texts like the Book of the Dead, a spiritual cheat sheet filled with prayers, spells, and helpful tips like, don't insult the crocodile god. So yes, the afterlife might be beautiful, but only if you live your life with extreme caution. One misplaced curse word, one unpaid temple tax, and your next stop is lunch for Amit. Sleep tight. If there's one small mercy in ancient Egypt, it's this linen. Blessed, incredibly breathable linen. Your entire wardrobe, and everyone else's, is crafted from this plant-based fabric. It's light, cool, and allows your skin to breathe in the scorching heat. That's the good news. The bad news? That's pretty much where the comfort ends. Whether you're a farmer, a builder, a priest, or a vendor, you're wearing the same basic outfit every single day. For men, it's a short white kilt or loincloth. For women, a straight, sleeveless linen dress, sometimes held up by straps, sometimes not. If you belong to the upper class, you might have pleats, beads, or fancy patterns. If you don't, it's plain white or slightly grayish, depending on how long it's been since laundry day. Oh, and laundry day? You're hand-scrubbing your clothes in the Nile while praying a hippopotamus doesn't emerge mid-rinse. Most people walk barefoot. Sandals made from woven reeds or leather are reserved for special occasions or temple priests. So unless you're royalty, expect to spend your days with hot sand between your toes and possibly a sharp rock embedded in your heel. Accessories? Absolutely, but primarily functional. Amulets for protection, necklaces to denote status, and eye makeup made from powdered coal, which wasn't solely for fashion. It helped reduce glare from the intense sun and was believed to ward off infections. Yes, even eyeliner had a practical purpose in ancient Egypt. But no matter how impeccably you dress, the bugs remain unimpressed. Flies, gnats, mosquitoes, they treat your airy outfit as an open invitation. You're constantly swatting throughout the day, perhaps rubbing on perfumed oils, and praying that your linen doesn't cling to you like a wet curtain the moment the sun reaches its full strength. And of course, your outfit doesn't change with the seasons because Egypt doesn't truly experience seasons, just hot and slightly less hot. So your linen ensemble essentially serves as your year-round uniform, whether it's a scorching 110 degrees Fahrenheit or a relatively chilly 70 degrees Fahrenheit evening. So yes, Egyptian clothing was light, elegant, and considerably more comfortable than what Romans would later wear. But don't let the breezy outfits deceive you, because no matter how floaty your tunic feels, your life remains heavy with relentless labor, intense heat, ubiquitous sand, and persistent bugs that refuse to respect your personal space. You've somehow survived another blistering Egyptian day, hauling bricks, dodging sandstorms, and praying your linen doesn't disintegrate mid-task. But in ancient Egypt, survival is always fleeting, because no matter how tough you are, you probably won't live past 35. Let's break it down. If you manage to survive childhood, which is already a significant achievement, considering infant mortality rates were astronomically high, you're thrust directly into adulthood by age 13. Marriage, work, and child-rearing all commence early because, frankly, you're running out of time. You might succumb to heat stroke or an infected cut or childbirth or crocodiles or scorpion stings or simply bad bread. And forget about antibiotics. If you develop a fever, the best available treatment consists of honey, herbs, and fervently hoping the gods don't have other plans for your soul. But here's the twist. Egyptians weren't afraid of death. In fact, they meticulously planned for it. They planned for it better than most people plan for retirement today. If you're wealthy, you commission a tomb, the ancient equivalent of a 5-star eternity suite. You begin accumulating grave goods, jewelry, food offerings, perfumes, carved statues, chests filled with linens, and for pharaohs, literal boatloads of treasure, all intended to accompany you into the afterlife. Think of them as spiritual interns who diligently work while you nap eternally. Your body is carefully embalmed, meticulously wrapped in linen, meticulously stuffed with natron, a natural salt, and precisely tucked into a beautifully painted sarcophagus. You're buried with a copy of the Book of the Dead, which is less about impending doom and more like a mystical travel guide, complete with passwords for the afterlife, spells to confuse demons, and crucial instructions for avoiding being devoured by soul-consuming monsters. If you're poor, well, your tomb is likely a shallow pit dug in the sand. Your body is wrapped in whatever fabric your family can spare. Perhaps a pot or two is placed nearby, and then you're simply covered with earth. No elaborate murals, no golden mask, just you and the wind. But even the poorest Egyptians clung to the dream of the afterlife, a serene, fertile paradise known as the Field of Reeds, where you farm without breaking a sweat, eat without hunger, and sail the Nile forever under a gentle sun. So yes, you'll probably die young in ancient Egypt. But if you lived virtuously, prayed correctly, and didn't insult too many jackal-headed gods, you just might spend eternity in style. You finally made it to the afterlife, or at least into the tomb. You've been embalmed, wrapped, blessed, and buried. Time to rest in peace, right? Well, not exactly, because in ancient Egypt, even the dead are susceptible to robbery. Let's begin with a simple truth. Tombs are filled with expensive possessions. Gold, amulets, jewelry, perfumed oils, carved statues, chests brimming with linens, and for pharaohs, literal boatloads of treasure, all meticulously intended to be transported into the afterlife. But treasure within a tomb essentially serves as an open invitation for anyone with a chisel and nefarious intentions. Tomb robbery was so pervasive that it evolved into a chronic problem. Pharaohs attempted to combat it by concealing their tombs deep within cliffs, securing them behind elaborate trapdoors, and scrawling terrifying curses on the walls. Ominous pronouncements like, "May a crocodile devour your soul," or "May your limbs be twisted forever by a serpent made of fire." Spoiler alert, the curses proved ineffective. Grave robbers arrived regardless under the cover of night, in utmost secrecy, often possessing insider knowledge. Sometimes they were locals. Sometimes they were corrupt workers who had assisted in constructing the tombs. In some instances, even priests and guards were complicit. And the punishment for being apprehended? Severe. Imagine public beatings, mutilation, exile, or death. But considering the immense value of tomb goods, especially gold and rare incense, the risk often appeared to be worthwhile. After all, the deceased don't fight back. But it wasn't just the wealthy who suffered from tomb disturbances. Even commoners' graves were desecrated. Poorer Egyptians might have been interred with a small pot of beer or a loaf of bread for the afterlife. That meager offering was still deemed worth stealing. Food was scarce, tools were valuable, and linen was a form of currency. The irony lies in the fact that tomb robbing wasn't solely driven by greed. Sometimes it was a matter of survival. Egypt endured famines, political collapses, and invasions. A starving worker might break into a tomb not for treasure, but for sustenance. And when your children are starving, a few funeral offerings suddenly appear less like sacred objects and more like dinner. So in ancient Egypt, you're not safe simply because you're dead. Your tomb can be plundered, your name erased, and your mummy unwrapped by some desperate soul wielding a pickaxe and possessing poor moral judgment. Rest in peace, only if no one knows your burial location. We've all seen them. Those majestic, mysterious carvings adorning the walls of temples and tombs. Birds, eyes, snakes, lotus flowers, men walking sideways as if on a fashion runway. Ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. Visually stunning and incredibly difficult to master. Sure, they look impressive, but try deciphering them. Hieroglyphs weren't merely decorative art. They constituted a full-fledged writing system comprising over 700 characters and constantly expanding. Some symbols represent entire words. Others denote sounds. And many are determinatives, which serve to clarify meaning because, writing the word star with an actual star symbol might be considered too straightforward. And don't expect spaces or punctuation. Ancient Egyptian writing was essentially one long, beautiful riddle, imbued with artistic flair, completely devoid of vowels, and heavily reliant on context. Oh, and it could be written left to right to left, or top to bottom, depending on the scribe's preference that day. The trick? Observe the direction the birds or people are facing. That indicates your reading direction. If they're facing right, read from the right. Facing left, read from the left. And if they're upside down, good luck with that. Learning to write hieroglyphs was not for commoners. Literacy was exceptionally rare. Perhaps only 1% of the population could actually read and write. If you desired entry into this exclusive group, you had to become a scribe, which entailed years of intense education commencing in childhood. You'd memorize hundreds of symbols, copy countless scrolls, and practice so extensively that your hand would likely curl into a permanent claw by age 15. But the rewards? Enormous. Scribes were highly respected, well-fed, and never compelled to haul bricks under the scorching sun. Instead, they meticulously recorded tax records, drafted court documents, composed letters, and transcribed religious texts. They were indispensable to society and largely exempt from manual labor. In a world where writing conferred immense power, scribes wielded quiet authority from the shadows. For the remainder of the population, however, writing held a magical significance. Literally, hieroglyphs were believed to possess sacred power. Inscribing someone's name preserved their soul. Erasing it, that meant total spiritual annihilation. So yes, spelling truly mattered. Thus, while hieroglyphs may resemble ancient emojis, they are more akin to a linguistic Rubik's Cube, intricately wrapped in myth, mathematics, and profound mystery. Beautiful, yes. Easy to learn? Absolutely not. After 14 chapters discussing the heat, hunger, pervasive sand, ingrained superstition, and backbreaking labor, it's time to pose the fundamental question. Would you survive a single day in ancient Egypt? Let's be candid. Probably not. Sure, it's easy to romanticize the ancient world, envisioning golden tombs, lotus-scented air, graceful hieroglyphs, and animal-headed gods with a penchant for order and beauty. But behind the iconic monuments and stunning artistry lay a world of brutal realities that spared no one except the elite. Your average Egyptian day commenced with a dirt floor, a cloud of flies, and the stark knowledge that if you didn't work, you wouldn't eat. You walked barefoot on scorching sand, hauled water, cooked over open fires, and lived shoulder to shoulder with insects, smoke, and livestock. You constantly worried about disease, divine punishment, and the possibility of a snake slithering into your sleeping mat. You had no toothpaste, no genuine medicine, no retirement plan, and if you were lucky, perhaps 2 changes of linen. You served a god-king who could seize your land with a mere decree, endured a climate that roasted your skin by noon, and adhered to a religion that demanded you pass a literal divine test after death just to access the desirable version of the afterlife. Let's also not overlook the things you lacked. No antibiotics, no sunscreen, no privacy, no plumbing, no painkillers, and no easy escape. Once you were born into your class, that was your lot in life. No promotions, no career changes, no. Finding yourself. You were either a scribe, a farmer, a laborer, a mother, a servant, or deceased. And yet, despite all these hardships, the ancient Egyptians were not inherently miserable. They believed profoundly in their gods, their purpose, and the inherent beauty of life. They cherished music, dance, food, family, and festivals. They joked, they painted, they envisioned eternity with enough clarity to construct stone monuments that still stand majestically today. But for a modern person, without your air conditioning, your filtered water, your Advil, your sneakers, and your smartphone, you'd likely collapse before the second sandstorm hit. So no, you wouldn't last a day in ancient Egypt. But that's perfectly all right, because they endured for thousands of years. And perhaps, just perhaps, that's why we continue to speak of them. In the heart of ancient Teotihuacan, one pyramid defiantly refuses to be forgotten. Its surface is adorned not with tranquil symbols of faith or gentle deities, but with snarling, open-mouthed stone serpents, dozens of them. They protrude from the temple's facade as if frozen mid-strike, fangs bared, eyes wide. This is the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, widely known as the Temple of Quetzalcoatl. But unlike most temples that aspire skyward with reverence, this one feels distinctively predatory. From the moment you approach it, there's an unsettling sense that you are being observed. The stone serpent heads are not mere embellishments. They were potent warnings, symbols of divine wrath. And beneath their watchful gaze, something horrific once transpired. Excavations over the past few decades have uncovered something entirely unexpected by archaeologists. Hidden beneath the temple's base were not just ceremonial offerings, but something far more disturbing: human remains. And not merely a handful. Over 200 bodies, many of them decapitated, their hands bound behind their backs. They were young men, possibly warriors, interred in groups with striking mathematical precision. Some were buried with obsidian knives at their sides. Others wore necklaces fashioned from human teeth or jewelry crafted from jawbones. They weren't simply cast into the ground. They were deliberately positioned in locations of profound symbolic significance. It's evident this was no ordinary mass grave. It was a message, a divine transaction meticulously carved into stone and sealed with blood. But what kind of belief system could justify such horror? Who demanded so many lives be taken simultaneously? The Temple of the Feathered Serpent wasn't just a religious edifice. It was a theater of power, a place where rulers seamlessly fused cosmology, warfare, and fear to maintain control over a city of more than 100,000 souls. And this ritual bloodletting may have been the perceived cost of maintaining cosmic balance. As you stand before this temple today, gazing at those stone serpents, you're not just observing art or architecture. You're looking into the very essence of a civilization that believed the gods demanded blood, and that they possessed every right to deliver it. But who were these people who commanded such violence and then vanished without a trace? The answer lies shrouded in the shadows of Teotihuacan. Before the formidable Aztec Empire, before the Maya meticulously carved their cosmic calendar into stone, there stood a city unlike any other in the ancient Americas, Teotihuacan. Its name, bestowed upon it by the later Aztecs, signifies the place where gods were born. And when you traverse its immense avenue of the dead, flanked by pyramids that seemingly scrape the heavens, you begin to grasp why. At its zenith, around 100 to 250 CE, Teotihuacan was a sprawling metropolis housing over 100,000 people, making it one of the largest cities in the world at that time, rivaling ancient Rome, Alexandria, and Chang'an in both size and influence. It was a city meticulously planned: wide boulevards, grid streets, apartment compounds housing extended families, and multi-story structures constructed from volcanic stone. And at the heart of it all stood three colossal pyramids: the Pyramid of the Moon, the Pyramid of the Sun, and the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. But here's what truly distinguishes Teotihuacan. No one knows who built it. Seriously, to this day, we do not know the name of the people who constructed this awe-inspiring place. We don't even know what they called themselves. There are no deciphered written records, no kings' names carved into stone. Teotihuacan appears to have been a society governed not by a single monarch, but perhaps by a council, a theocracy, or something entirely alien to our contemporary understanding of ancient power dynamics. And despite this anonymity, their influence was immense. Evidence of Teotihuacan's power has been discovered hundreds of miles away, from the Maya cities of Tikal and Copan to the distant Zapotec capital of Monte Alban. Obsidian blades, distinctive ceramic styles, intricate murals, and even direct political intervention. In one notable instance, Teotihuacan emissaries may have facilitated the overthrow of a local Maya king to install a ruler more aligned with their interests. But how did they sustain such an expansive network? How did a city with no known writing system command such authority across Mesoamerica? The answer may lie in their unique fusion of cosmic ideology with statecraft. Their temples were more than mere places of worship. They were instruments of control, meticulously aligning with astronomical events, serving as dramatic theaters for ritual sacrifice, and constantly reminding every citizen and visitor that Teotihuacan was no ordinary city. It was the very axis of the world, a sacred engine that meticulously kept time, fate, and blood flowing in cosmic synchronicity. And at the heart of it all stood the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. To understand the temple, you must first grasp the essence of the deity to whom it was consecrated, the feathered serpent. Known later by the Aztecs as Quetzalcoatl and to the Maya as Kukulkan, this figure represents one of the most enigmatic gods in all of Mesoamerican mythology. But in Teotihuacan, centuries before the Aztecs ascended to power, the feathered serpent was already a central, and possibly supreme, divine force. But here's the paradox. What kind of god is simultaneously a serpent and a bird? Consider that duality. Serpents slither through the underworld. They shed their skin, symbolizing rebirth, duality, and death. Birds, conversely, soar high in the sky, closer to the sun, representing freedom, divinity, and life-giving wind. To combine these two, earthbound and sky-dwelling, death and life, chaos and order, was to forge something utterly cosmic, something terrifyingly potent. The feathered serpent wasn't just a god. He was a bridge between distinct worlds. On the facade of the temple, carved in deep relief, we observe dozens of his images. Prominent goggle eyes, bared teeth, and elaborate plumed headdresses. Some historians believe these represent the god himself. Others suggest they depict warriors or priestly figures adorned in divine regalia to signify their authority. Either way, they are omnipresent. The temple is covered in these striking snake-bird hybrids, as if the very structure breathes with divine presence. But the feathered serpent was not solely a god of the heavens. He was intimately linked to sacrifice. Blood was believed to be the fuel that kept the cosmos in motion. And Quetzalcoatl, though later remembered as a benevolent, civilizing deity, played a much darker role in Teotihuacan. He demanded offerings, and not merely of maize or incense, but of life itself. In some myths, he descended into the underworld to retrieve the bones of the dead and create humankind. But to bring life from death, a trade had to occur. The gods sacrificed themselves for humanity, and humans, in return, were expected to reciprocate. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent wasn't just a monument to faith. It was a cosmic engine designed to link the sky, the earth, and the underworld through ritual. Every stone, every serpent head, every buried victim fed into that intricate system. Teotihuacan didn't merely worship the feathered serpent. They embodied his logic, his paradox, his power, and his demand for blood. And the most unsettling truths were concealed beneath the surface. For centuries, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent stood silently, a weathered, imposing structure half swallowed by time. Locals whispered legends. Scholars offered speculative guesses. But no one could have possibly imagined what lay buried beneath its layered stones until archaeologists broke through in the late 1980s and early 2000s. What they discovered wasn't just unexpected. It was profoundly unsettling. Hidden beneath the temple's foundations were a series of long-sealed chambers and pits, each filled with meticulously arranged human remains. These weren't the chaotic results of war or disease. These were deliberate sacrifices, systematic, ritualistic, and chillingly precise. The victims, numbering over 200, were predominantly young men, many between the ages of 15 and 25. Some wore necklaces crafted from human jawbones. Others had their hands bound behind their backs. A few were decapitated. Obsidian knives, sharp and black as night, were scattered nearby, the unmistakable instruments of ritual slaughter. And this is where it gets even darker. The arrangement of the bodies followed precise geometric and symbolic patterns. They weren't interred randomly. They were placed in quadrants, aligning with cardinal directions, possibly mirroring the cosmos itself. Even the sheer number of bodies held significance. It wasn't simply about death. It was about meaningful death. Offerings surrounded the victims. Jaguar bones, serpents, exotic shells transported from the distant Gulf Coast, figurines, and obsidian blades that had never been used in battle. This wasn't punishment. It was considered a sacred gift. These young men, most likely warriors, had been chosen not to die in disgrace, but to die as an integral part of something transcendent. To the Teotihuacanos, the very act of constructing a temple may have necessitated human sacrifice. It was as if every single stone had to be consecrated with blood, every layer added only after a profound offering had been made. The deeper archaeologists delved, the more evidence of sacrifice they uncovered. In one chamber, they discovered elaborate tunnels filled with mercury and mica, materials strongly associated with the underworld. The floor shimmered like water. Was this a symbolic passage to the land of the dead? A shimmering mirror of the night sky? The more they excavated, the more it became apparent that the temple was not built on top of death, but meticulously constructed to encase it. The blood didn't accidentally stain the stone. The stone was explicitly designed to hold the blood, and all of it was for the gods. Look more closely at the temple of the feathered serpent, and you'll discern something peculiar, something profoundly unnerving. It doesn't merely rest upon the landscape. It aligns with the very fabric of the universe. Teotihuacan wasn't constructed haphazardly. The entire city was laid out along precise cosmic axes. Its central avenue of the dead runs at a 15-degree angle off true north. Not an error, but a deliberate shift, possibly to align with the setting of the Pleiades star cluster or the sun on specific ritual dates. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent is situated directly along this avenue, locking it into a grand celestial blueprint. But why? What were they striving to align with? Archaeologists and archaeoastronomers have debated this for decades. Some suggest the temple perfectly aligns with the equinox sunrise. Others argue it connects to Venus, the planet most sacred to Mesoamerican civilizations, frequently associated with war, sacrifice, and rebirth. When Venus rose or set, wars were declared, offerings were made, and temples were activated with ritual fire. Even the temple's dimensions appear intentional. The recurring motif of the number 7, representing the number of visible planetary bodies, is evident in its stepped platforms. There's symmetry, rhythm, and a stunning comprehension of both earthly mathematics and cosmic cycles. And beneath the surface, further clues abound. In 2003, archaeologists uncovered a tunnel beneath the temple. Not a crude passage, but a meticulously constructed subterranean world. Its walls were once covered in powdered pyrite, a shimmering mineral that would have reflected light like distant starlight. Combined with pools of liquid mercury and mica-lined walls, the tunnel seemed designed to replicate the cosmos itself. To traverse it would have been akin to traveling through the Milky Way, a symbolic journey to the underworld or perhaps a passage to rebirth. Was this temple not just a place of sacrifice but a grand cosmic machine? A portal that flawlessly aligned earth, sky, and the spiritual realm? Some scholars believe the people of Teotihuacan perceived time as circular, not linear. Every ritual, every building, every sacrifice was not a singular event. It was an integral part of an eternal cycle, death leading to renewal, sacrifice fueling rebirth. The temple's alignments may have helped predict celestial movements, coordinate harvests, and, most importantly, determine the precise timing for offering blood. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent wasn't merely observing the stars. It was striving to communicate with them. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent wasn't just a spiritual beacon. It was a potent political weapon. Its very design was intended to overwhelm, to intimidate, to remind every viewer, whether local or foreign, who held the reins of power in Teotihuacan. Imagine standing in its imposing shadow 1,800 years ago. You, a visitor from a smaller city-state, would arrive at the Avenue of the Dead, already awestruck by the sheer scale of Teotihuacan. But when you reached the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, you would instinctively freeze. The serpent heads would stare at you, their fangs bared. Jaguar symbols would growl from the stone. The plaza ahead once hosted massive gatherings, not merely for celebration, but for solemn public ritual. You might even bear witness to a human sacrifice. The ruling elite of Teotihuacan understood something crucial. Fear is power, and nothing instills fear like divine wrath. By orchestrating ritual executions in broad daylight, surrounded by cosmic symbols and death imagery, they conveyed an unambiguous message. The gods are with us, and we are not afraid to feed them. But this wasn't chaos. This was meticulously staged theater. Priests adorned in feathered headdresses and obsidian masks would chant, dance, and spill blood, transforming cosmic myth into a powerful political performance. It wasn't just about pleasing the gods. It was about reminding everyone observing that the city's rulers possessed direct access to the divine. They alone could open the heavens or summon rain, protect the populace or destroy their adversaries. Even the architecture itself served to reinforce this propaganda. From the temple's upper tiers, leaders could gaze down upon the plaza. They controlled not just the narrative, but the very physical space in which it unfolded. The people looked up at the gods, at the rulers, at the sacrifices, and understood their place within the cosmic order. And for outsiders, Teotihuacan did not need to conquer with swords. It conquered with symbols. Visiting dignitaries would carry home tales of profound awe and terror. They would speak of the feathered serpents, the endless avenues, and the blood rituals that stained the sky red. In a world where gods ruled through fear, Teotihuacan positioned itself as their chosen mouthpiece. And the Temple of the Feathered Serpent was its loudest voice of all. At its zenith, Teotihuacan was the very heartbeat of Mesoamerica, a city forged from fire and stone, of gods and blood, a metropolis that seemed destined to endure eternally. But around the year 550 CE, something fundamentally shifted. Something broke, and the ensuing silence was as chilling as the temple's stone serpent heads. The decline of Teotihuacan was not a loud, glorious collapse. It was gradual, then abruptly decisive. Signs of strain began appearing decades earlier, indicators that the cosmic engine was faltering. Evidence points to an extended period of drought, widespread crop failure, and escalating social unrest. The very systems that had sustained this grand city, centralized power, religious dominance, cosmic order, began to fracture under immense pressure. And then came the fire. Archaeologists have uncovered widespread burn layers across elite compounds, temples, and administrative buildings, including clear signs of violent destruction at the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. What's peculiar is that the lower-class residential areas were largely untouched. This wasn't an external invasion. This was an internal uprising, a rebellion, possibly originating from within its own populace. The very people who had once watched sacrifices in awe may have risen against their priest-kings. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent, once a powerful symbol of divine authority, was ransacked. Sculptures were defaced. Fires were deliberately set. Ritual spaces were desecrated. And then silence. Teotihuacan was not completely abandoned overnight, but it lost its soul. Trade networks disintegrated. Artistic production ceased. The grand rituals stopped. The temple no longer spoke. And yet the mystery only deepened, because while the city faded, its memory endured. Centuries later, the Aztecs arrived in the Valley of Mexico and stumbled upon its magnificent ruins. They were awestruck. They truly believed gods had constructed this place. They named it Teotihuacan, the place where gods were born. They wove their own myths around its towering pyramids, revering it as sacred ground, even though they had no idea who its original builders were. To them, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent was not a ruin. It was a sacred relic of divine truth. But the irony remains. The most powerful city of its time, built on cosmic order and blood, vanished without a single written word, without a final record, leaving behind only stone and persistent questions. The gods, it seemed, had gone quiet. For over 1,000 years, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent lay interred beneath layers of dust, volcanic ash, and profound silence. Locals avoided it. Farmers tilled around its edges. And the world forgot it, until the modern era of archaeology arrived and dramatically unveiled the secrets hidden within its very heart. In the early 20th century, Mexican archaeologists commenced excavating Teotihuacan. What they discovered was astonishing. A meticulously engineered city, far older than the Aztecs. But it wasn't until the 1980s and 2000s that the temple itself began to yield its most intimate and most chilling revelations. One of the most dramatic discoveries occurred in 2011, when researchers uncovered a sealed tunnel beneath the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. It had been deliberately closed off nearly 1,800 years earlier, as if to prevent anyone from ever entering again. After years of meticulous excavation, scientists unearthed a cosmic corridor, a symbolic underworld shimmering with pyrite to mimic a starlit sky, containing pools of liquid mercury and thousands of ritual objects. Jade statues, rubber balls, obsidian blades, and even intricately carved wooden masks felt less like a mere tomb and more like a profound message. Why would the ancient builders go to such extraordinary lengths? What were they attempting to preserve or conceal? Some experts believe the tunnel was utilized in elaborate initiation rituals. Others suggest it symbolized the very creation of the world, a mythological womb where gods were born, where kings were consecrated, where divine order was negotiated between humans and the cosmos. The mercury, once considered merely toxic, may have represented water or the fluid veil separating worlds. And amidst all these glittering fragments, one persistent whisper lingered. The feathered serpent still remained, not just as a myth, but as a palpable presence, evident in murals, in carvings, in the precise geometry of the temple itself. The serpent hadn't vanished. It had coiled inward, deep into the very bones of the city, patiently awaiting rediscovery. And with each excavation, each unearthed jawbone or golden ornament, we draw a little closer to its profound message, one carved not in language, but in stone, sacrifice, and enduring shadow. Modern science has equipped us with X-rays, drones, and ground-penetrating radar. But even with all our advanced tools, one truth remains. The temple continues to guard its secrets. Today, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent stands as a haunting monument, not just to a civilization long gone, but to a way of thinking that seamlessly merged power, cosmos, and death into one unbreakable system. Tourists capture photographs, children run past the stone serpent heads, but the ground beneath their feet is saturated with 1,000 untold stories and over 200 known human sacrifices. And still, the temple endures. Its legacy isn't solely architectural. It's deeply psychological, spiritual, and cultural. The feathered serpent, this paradoxical god of sky and earth, continued to evolve. He would be adopted by the Toltecs, then spectacularly reborn by the Aztecs as Quetzalcoatl, where his myth took on a gentler tone, portrayed as the bringer of knowledge, the compassionate god who wept for humanity, the one who vowed to return. This reimagining of the serpent god demonstrates how myths don't die. They profoundly transform. Even in modern Mexico, echoes of the feathered serpent persist in art, in murals, in literature, and in national identity. The temple's image has appeared on coins, stamps, and even government buildings. It has become a powerful symbol of mystery, of pre-Columbian brilliance, and of the untamed spiritual world that once pulsed through Mesoamerica. But there's another legacy, one less visible, more uncomfortable. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent compels us to confront the true price of belief. It asks difficult questions. How far will humans go to feel connected to the divine? What transpires when power and religion become indistinguishable? Can breathtaking beauty truly coexist with profound terror? In many respects, the temple isn't just a historical site. It's a mirror, a reflection of ourselves, our enduring fascination with life after death, our insatiable hunger for meaning, our capacity to construct monuments of staggering beauty and to tragically stain them with blood. The temple teaches us that greatness is always accompanied by shadows, that civilizations can ascend to impossible heights while burying their darkest secrets beneath the very stones they lay. And perhaps that's why we continually return, not merely to visit, but to deeply understand. Because deep down, we know the serpent is still watching, not to strike, but to remind us of what we once were and what we still might tragically be. Before we articulated in words, we communicated through rhythm. Tens of thousands of years ago, long before the invention of writing, even prior to the birth of language itself, early humans began to create something that could only be described as sound with intention. Not speech, not melody, but pure rhythm. A hand slapping hollow bark, a stick tapping a resonant stone, a foot stomping earth in precise time. Somewhere within that ancient repetition, something magical emerged. The very first drumbeat. It wasn't called music. It wasn't called anything at all. but it felt like something, like communication, like movement, like raw emotion taking tangible form. Anthropologists have unearthed evidence of primitive percussion instruments dating back over 30,000 years. These were likely crafted from readily available natural materials: hollowed tree trunks, gourds, and stretched animal hides. Nothing elaborate, nothing designed for permanent preservation. But these rudimentary drums were not mere toys or idle distractions. They served profound purposes: to warn, to summon, to connect. Imagine a tribe dispersed across a dense forest. One beat from a distant drum, and others instantly knew danger was approaching, or a celebration had commenced, or the gods were attentively listening. The earliest drums weren't just tools. They were extensions of the human body, an externalized heartbeat, a pulsating rhythm that could be felt across an entire valley. Drumming wasn't something you passively observed or merely listened to. It was something you actively participated in, together, gathered around fires beneath starlit skies, within caves where echoes caused the very air to vibrate. These ancient rhythms evolved into a language of emotion: joy, grief, warning, hope, all expressed not through syllables or symbols, but through patterned sound. Before the first flutes were carved, before string instruments were even conceived, the drum was already vibrantly alive, anchoring us in time, giving shape to sacred ritual, and uniting individuals into cohesive tribes. In this way, the drum became humanity's first instrument and, perhaps, its most fundamental form of collective identity. No matter where on Earth people resided, they instinctively created something to strike, something to beat, something to mark the profound rhythm of the moment. Because even when we lacked words, we possessed rhythm. And that rhythm was everything. In the cradle of early human civilization, drums transcended mere instruments. They became sacred voices. Every tribe, every culture, every corner of the earth developed its own distinctive rhythm, but the underlying purpose was nearly universal: to commune with the unseen world. In Africa, where some of the world's earliest drums originated, rhythm was profoundly intertwined with life, death, and ancestry. The gem, meticulously carved from a single tree and covered in goat skin, was believed to embody three spirits: that of the tree from which it was carved, the animal whose skin gave it voice, and the craftsman who brought it to life. Played in communal circles, the gem didn't merely accompany rituals. It was the ritual. Then there were the remarkable talking drums, capable of mimicking human speech through subtle variations in pitch and tone. In West Africa, these drums transmitted messages across vast distances, relaying news, warnings, births, and deaths from one village to the next. Long before the advent of the telephone, humans were already drumming their messages across the landscape. Across the oceans, Native American tribes regarded the drum as a living entity. It was considered the very heartbeat of Mother Earth, played in solemn ceremonies to honor ancestors, invoke healing, or guide the souls of the departed. The large powwow drum, played collectively by a circle of drummers, functioned as both a musical and spiritual engine, a communal pulse that harmonized humans with nature and spirit. In Australia, the Aboriginal people utilized clapsticks and percussive stomps in the sacred Dreamtime, a mythic era of creation. In the Arctic, Inuit shamans struck frame drums to induce trance states, seeking visions or communicating with spirits during the long, dark winters. These were not mere performances. These were acts of profound survival, healing, storytelling, and deep connection. To drum was to remember. To drum was to belong. And always it was a communal act. Drums drew people together into sacred circles, synchronizing hearts and intentions. No sheet music, no elaborate stage. Just bodies moving, hands striking, souls stirring, all unified by the powerful force of rhythm. No matter where on earth you stood, if you heard a drumbeat in the distance, you knew something sacred was transpiring, something that words alone could never fully express. From sacred circles to bloody battlefields, the drum has always communicated, sometimes with comfort and sometimes with decisive command. As human societies evolved into complex kingdoms and vast empires, drums transformed into potent tools of domination, instruments of imposing order, and formidable weapons of fear. The earliest armies lacked radios or megaphones. They possessed drums. In ancient China, colossal drums called bagu were struck to coordinate troops across immense terrains. With a single resonant boom, commanders could signal a charge, a strategic retreat, or a flanking maneuver. These drums were not just loud. They were inherently strategic. Each rhythm conveyed a specific meaning, and trained soldiers understood how to interpret it, even amidst the chaos of battle. In Mesopotamia, temple drums were used to announce rulers and summon the public, but during times of conflict, their deep, relentless thunder echoed through city walls, terrifying approaching enemies. It wasn't just percussion. It was a powerful form of psychological warfare. When the Romans marched, they brought with them the tympanum, a frame drum utilized in processions and by cults, such as that of Cybele. Though not primarily a battlefield instrument in the manner of horns and standards, it carried significant symbolic power, emitting a sound of empire, discipline, and unwavering order. But no army wielded drums quite like the Ottomans. Their Mater bands, recognized as the world's first known military orchestras, unleashed an overwhelming storm of drums, cymbals, and horns before battles. The relentless pounding of kos, giant kettle drums, and davul, double-headed bass drums, instilled profound terror into the hearts of enemy forces. Some European accounts describe soldiers freezing in panic before even seeing the Ottomans, completely paralyzed by the sheer volume of sound. Drums also reinforced power away from the battlefield. In royal courts across Asia, Africa, and Europe, drum ensembles announced arrivals, marked coronations, and underscored important political rituals. To strike a drum was to unequivocally declare, "Power is present." Even enslaved people in the Americas utilized drums as vital tools of resistance. On plantations, rhythmic communication sustained cultural identity and helped orchestrate clandestine rebellions. The drum, even under oppressive conditions, refused to be silenced. So whether it signaled divine right, military discipline, or raw fear, the drum has always carried a potent message. This is who rules, this is who marches, and this is the enduring rhythm of power. As civilizations expanded across continents, so too did their rhythms, evolving in form, purpose, and underlying philosophy. In the East, drums transformed into instruments of precision, spirituality, and ceremony. In the West, they gravitated towards military power and, eventually, grand orchestral arrangements. Two distinct worlds, two divergent paths, yet fundamentally united by one shared heartbeat. In India, the drum became a sacred instrument of divine language. The tabla, with its crisp tones and fluid grace, was employed in classical music and devotional performances. But it transcended mere accompaniment. It was a profound conversation. Each stroke possessed a name, a meaning, a syllabic identity. Indian drumming wasn't merely percussive. It was spoken poetry, perfected over decades of rigorous training. The tabla player was not just a musician, he was a true linguist of rhythm. In Japan, the taiko drum emerged as a ceremonial giant. Played in Shinto rituals, theatrical performances, and wartime contexts, taiko demanded not just technical skill but profound physical discipline. The drummers moved with martial precision, their stances grounded like warriors. In festivals, the booming taiko resonated through mountain valleys, believed to banish evil spirits and summon the gods down to earth. Meanwhile, in Indonesia, the kendang drum led the hypnotic flows of gamelan orchestras, guiding both dancers and musicians in sacred temple ceremonies. These rhythms were intricately layered, interlocked, and celestial, a sonic reflection of cosmic harmony. Across the world, in Europe, drums had a different narrative. They were largely utilitarian during the medieval period, primarily used for signaling soldiers, marking time, and enforcing discipline. It wasn't until the Renaissance and Baroque eras that drums began to formally integrate into music. Even then, they were largely relegated to the background, timpani thundering beneath royal fanfare or echoing within grand cathedrals. In this divergence, one can discern two distinct philosophies. The East regarded rhythm as an art form and a spiritual conduit, intimately tied to breath, chant, and meditation. The West viewed it as structure and force, a practical tool for rallying troops, maintaining march, and measuring time. But both understood the drum's fundamental power: to shape time, to dictate pace, to elevate ritual, and to connect humans in ways that transcend spoken language. East or West, sacred or strategic, the drum remained central, always listening, always speaking. From mountaintop temples to dense jungle clearings, from desert fires to candlelit cathedrals, drums have consistently held a place where the human spirit meets the divine. Long before organized religion firmly took root, rhythm was already a sacred language, a profound means to pray, to summon, to transcend. In Africa, drums were not merely instruments. They were regarded as spiritual beings. In Yoruba traditions, for instance, the bata drum was specifically used to communicate with the orishas, gods and ancestral spirits. Drummers were not performers. They were revered priests. The rhythms they played were meticulously encoded prayers, inviting the gods to descend and dance among the living. Each pattern served a specific purpose. Each beat conveyed a particular direction. In Hinduism, the drum appears even in the hands of the gods themselves. The deity Shiva, in his iconic form as Nutraja, dances the cosmic dance of creation and destruction with a small, hourglass-shaped drum in his hand, the damaru. Its beat represents the very pulse of the universe itself. From silence to sound, from void to form, the drum embodies a divine heartbeat. In Buddhism, the ritual frame drum is employed in monastic chants and meditation ceremonies. Its slow, soft strikes guide breath and awareness, acting as a metronome for the soul. It's not loud. It's not aggressive. It simply serves to remind the practitioner to consistently return to the present moment. Across the Americas, indigenous tribes utilize drums in vision quests, sweat lodges, and healing ceremonies. The beat is constant, steady, mimicking the primal rhythm of the womb, helping participants enter trance states or connect with ancestral spirits. In these sacred spaces, the drum doesn't just accompany prayer. It is the prayer. Even within Christianity, where rhythm was often subdued, the drum still found a sacred role. In gospel traditions, particularly within African American churches, drums became a powerful means of praise and spiritual force, providing a vital heartbeat behind voices lifted in devotion, a profound reminder of struggle, hope, and divine rhythm in every life. Regardless of the faith, the specific ritual, or the deity invoked, the drum has always been present, not as mere decoration, but as a vessel for energy, intention, and the profound mysteries that defy verbal articulation. Because when words fail in worship, rhythm endures, and the divine always listens. For thousands of years, drums were primarily solitary instruments. One body, one sound, one singular purpose. But in the heart of the industrial age, something truly revolutionary occurred. In bustling factories, vibrant streets, and grand music halls, percussion was fundamentally reimagined. And by the early 20th century, multiple drums were no longer dispersed across a stage. They were unified, forming something entirely new: the drum kit. Its genesis stemmed from necessity. In the late 1800s, military and theater bands required several percussionists to play the bass drum, snare, cymbals, and woodblocks, with each instrument handled by a different person. But space was often limited, and budgets were even tighter. So drummers began to ingeniously combine instruments into a single, playable setup. By 1909, the first bass drum pedal was patented. This innovation allowed a single drummer to strike a massive bass drum with one foot, freeing their hands to perform more complex rhythms. The idea rapidly gained traction. Over the subsequent decades, drummers added hi-hats, toms, cowbells, and ride cymbals, creating a comprehensive setup that could mimic an entire percussion section, all controlled from a single seat. What emerged was more than a mere tool. It was a true drummer's throne. And then came jazz. In the smoky clubs and clandestine dance halls of New Orleans and Chicago, the drum kit burst into vibrant life. Jazz drummers didn't just maintain time. They played the kit like a distinct voice, with intricate syncopation, compelling swing, and nuanced sensitivity. Legends such as Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich transformed the drum set into a lead instrument. Rhythm evolved into pure storytelling. As jazz transitioned into rock, the drum kit grew louder, heavier, and undeniably more powerful. The 1960s and 70s witnessed kits expanding with multiple toms, splash cymbals, and double bass pedals. Drummers like John Bonham, Neil Peart, and Keith Moon pushed the boundaries of both stamina and creative expression. The drummer was no longer in the background. He or she was the very engine of the music. Today, the drum kit is a global staple, from vibrant gospel churches to pulsating EDM stages, from raw punk garages to massive world tours. And even as digital kits and drum machines gain prominence, the undeniable physicality of a live drum kit, the sticks, the skins, the sweat remains irreplaceable. It stands as a powerful symbol of modern rhythm, a compelling fusion of centuries where tradition seamlessly meets innovation, and where a single drummer can speak with 10 voices simultaneously. The world beats in thousands of unique dialects, and so too do its drums. From continent to continent, from culture to culture, the drum has assumed countless forms, each carrying a distinct identity, a unique sound, and a specific purpose. These are not just instruments. They are profound cultural signatures, meticulously crafted from local materials, shaped by local hands, and deeply imbued with the rhythms of everyday life. In West Africa, the djem continues to serve as the heartbeat of community gatherings. It speaks in sharp slaps and deep bass tones, designed for intricate storytelling and spontaneous conversation. Alongside it, the dun-dun provides the foundational pulse, a rhythmic anchor around which other instruments and dancers can gracefully move. In Africa, a drum ensemble is not merely music. It is a profound conversation between spirits, ancestors, and the living. In the Middle East, the darbuka, a goblet-shaped drum crafted from clay or metal, delivers crisp, fast-paced rhythms essential to belly dancing and classical Arabic music. Its voice is sharp and articulate, demanding precision from its player and inspiring movement from its listeners. Across the Caribbean and Latin America, drums narrate a different story, one born from resilience and cultural fusion. The conga, bongo, and timbales reflect the vibrant blend of African, indigenous, and Spanish influences. In Cuba, the sacred bata drums are employed in Santeria rituals, each drum speaking a divine language intricately tied to the orishas. In Brazil, the thunderous beats of surdo and cuica propel samba parades through the streets, infusing joy into protest, prayer, and carnival. In India, the mridangam and tabla dominate South and North Indian classical music, respectively. These drums are so meticulously precise that they are tuned to specific pitches, blurring the line between rhythm and melody. Every finger movement matters. Each stroke carries centuries of profound tradition. Then there's the versatile frame drum, one of the oldest in human history, appearing in everything from the Persian daf to the Irish bowron, from shamanic tools to vibrant folk ensembles. Played with fingertips, mallets, or brushes, it stands as testament to the profound power of simplicity. What unites them all? Their inherent purpose. Whether guiding dance, facilitating healing, enriching ritual, or fueling revolution, each drum reflects the deep soul of its people. The global drum family isn't just diverse, it's profoundly universal. Because no matter where you travel, the earth continues to resonate with rhythm. As the 20th century neared its end, the sound of drums began to transform, not in rhythm but in texture. The physical gave way to the programmable. The sweaty palms, the wooden sticks, the calloused fingertips all began to share space with intricate circuits, responsive pads, and sophisticated software. The era of digital drums had arrived. It commenced in the 1970s with primitive drum machines, early devices like the Rhythm Icon and Roland CR78 that utilized analog circuits to simulate basic beats. Initially, they sounded robotic, even somewhat awkward, but visionary musicians recognized something else: consistency, precise control, and endless creative possibility. Then came a true revolution. In 1980, Roland released the TR-808, a drum machine so iconic that its deep, booming kick and crisp snare would go on to define entire musical genres. Hip-hop, techno, electro, and trap were all born, in part, from its distinctive synthetic pulse. The goal was no longer merely to mimic acoustic drums. It was about creating entirely new sonic landscapes. As digital audio technology progressed, so too did the available tools. Electronic drum kits, such as the Roland V drums, allowed drummers to play naturally while simultaneously triggering thousands of sampled or synthesized tones. Artists could now rehearse in silence, record without microphones, and effortlessly switch drum kits with the press of a button. And with the advent of computers came powerful digital audio workstations, DAWs, like Ableton, FL Studio, and Logic. Now, anyone with a laptop could construct complex rhythms, layering intricate kicks, snares, hi-hats, and sub-bass into vast sonic architectures. Finger drumming on MIDI pads even evolved into an art form of its own. Some feared this shift signaled the demise of traditional drumming, a replacement of human feel with cold, sterile precision. But that didn't happen. Instead, a fascinating hybridity emerged. Acoustic drummers began seamlessly integrating electronic triggers and samples into their traditional kits. Producers started layering human-played drums with machine beats. The organic and the synthetic found a compelling groove together. Digital drums didn't erase the past. They ingeniously reimagined it. And today, we reside in a world where a single individual in a bedroom can construct rhythms that once required entire orchestras, where ancient grooves from Africa, Asia, and the Americas can be sampled, manipulated, and given new life on neon-lit dance floors. The tools have undeniably changed, but the fundamental purpose remains the same: to move bodies, to shape time, to make silence speak. Across every era, every empire, and every technological evolution, one truth has never changed. The drum remains our oldest and most enduring voice. From ancient fire circles to modern concert halls, from sacred rituals to vibrant digital dance floors, the drum has never been solely about music. It's fundamentally about connection, to ourselves, to each other, to something profoundly larger than us. It is the universal heartbeat we all share, not metaphorically, literally, because even before we are born, nestled safely within the womb, the very first rhythm we ever perceive is that of our mother's heart. Steady, safe, alive. And when life truly begins, we relentlessly pursue that rhythm forever. The drum has served as our steadfast companion through joy and through war, through worship and through protest. It has marched beside kings and risen in defiance with rebels. It has echoed through grand temples and grimy subway tunnels. It communicates in every language because it is a language, one that bypasses intellectual thought and speaks directly to the body, the bones, the very blood within us. In moments of profound grief, we drum to mourn. In moments of pure ecstasy, we drum to celebrate. And in the quiet, reflective spaces in between, we drum to remember who we truly are. Today, percussion continues its relentless evolution. You can encounter handpan street musicians weaving intricate New Age rhythms on bustling city corners. Indigenous communities are diligently preserving ancient drumming traditions against formidable odds. Stadium drummers enthusiastically rally crowds in unison. Children gleefully bang pots and pans with instinctive joy. Even artificial intelligence is now learning rhythm. But no algorithm can truly replicate the human soul that lies behind a single, imperfect beat. Because rhythm is not merely counted. It is deeply felt. And perhaps that's precisely why the drum has outlived countless empires and fleeting trends. Because deep down, we all yearn for the anchoring presence of time, the shared pulse that tells us we are here, together, now. No matter how advanced our instruments become or how virtual our experiences grow, there will always be something profoundly grounding about skin on skin, stick on hide, hand on wood. A beat, a breath, a beginning. The drum is not a mere relic of the past. It is a powerful reminder that we were always destined to move in rhythm, to listen, to feel, to play. And as long as humanity endures, the drum will never be silent. Before Manhattan transformed into a towering forest of glass and steel, it was an island of shadows, cast not by immense skyscrapers, but by elegant church steeples and gently sloping rooftops. In the early 1800s, the concept of a skyline barely existed. The city clung tightly to the southern tip of the island, a dense, sprawling mass of brick townhouses, timber-framed shops, and dirt-packed roads. Buildings rarely ascended beyond 5 or 6 stories, not because ambition was lacking, but because the immutable force of gravity held the final say. The taller the structure, the more immense the weight it carried, and with traditional stone and brick construction, achieving significant height came at an exorbitant price. The walls at the base had to be disproportionately thicker to support the upper levels, leaving less usable interior space and necessitating enormous foundations. To build high was to build heavy, and heavy simply did not make financial sense. So the city expanded horizontally, spreading northward along a meticulously planned grid that had been laid out in 1811, one of the boldest urban blueprints of its time. But beneath that grid, beneath the layers of cobblestone and soil, Manhattan held a crucial secret weapon: bedrock. Deep, dense, and unyielding, the granite spine that ran beneath the island would one day support some of the tallest structures in human history. But for now, it lay quietly dormant, untouched, patiently waiting. Life in early Manhattan was bustling but firmly grounded. Commerce thrived in the harbor, ships lined the piers, and horses clattered through narrow, bustling streets. The economy grew robustly, immigration surged, and the island swelled with vibrant energy. But still, the city hugged the ground. The sky remained largely untouched. The only significant vertical statements were churches, with Trinity Church being the most prominent. Its spire, completed in 1846, rose over 280 feet, and for a period, it stood as the tallest structure in New York. But even that was more a symbol than a true skyline feature. What no one knew then was that the skyline's future would not be shaped by stone or wood, but by the innovative power of iron, steel, and visionary ambition. And it would not be limited by the ground. It would ascend far above it. Manhattan was not yet a city of towering structures, but the stage was being meticulously set. The island was ready. The dream was slowly forming. And soon, the skyline would begin its dramatic stretch. For centuries, gravity stood as the supreme architect in Manhattan. It ensured buildings remained short, cities stayed flat, and human ambition remained tethered to the earth. But in the mid-19th century, 2 pivotal breakthroughs would fundamentally open up the skyline. One innovation lifted people. The other revolutionized how buildings were constructed, effectively lifting them. The first breakthrough arrived in 1852, when an inventor named Elisha Otis unveiled his revolutionary safety elevator. In a dramatic public demonstration at the New York Crystal Palace, Otis stood confidently on a platform suspended high above a captivated crowd. He then famously ordered the rope to be severed. The crowd gasped in collective apprehension, but the platform did not plummet. A cleverly hidden mechanism instantly locked the lift in place. With that single, breathtaking moment, Otis fundamentally altered the rules of vertical construction. Until then, the top floors of buildings were considered the least desirable and therefore the cheapest. No one wished to climb that many stairs. But once elevators became both safe and practical, those upper floors transformed into premium spaces, offering abundant light, fresh air, and elevated status. The concept of a vertical city suddenly made profound economic sense. But merely being able to transport people upward was not sufficient. Buildings still relied heavily on load-bearing walls, which grew progressively thicker and more cumbersome the higher they extended. That's where innovation number 2 arrived: the steel skeleton. In the 1880s and 1890s, visionary engineers began employing steel frames to support the entire weight of buildings, allowing exterior walls to become thin curtains rather than heavy structural anchors. This revolutionary method, known as steel frame construction, granted architects unprecedented freedom. They could now build as high as the underlying steel frame could structurally accommodate. Suddenly, extreme height was no longer an insurmountable risk. It became a strategic advantage. The necessary technology had arrived. The crucial materials were now available. And Manhattan, with its exceptionally solid bedrock and booming economy, presented the perfect canvas for this vertical transformation. The island's constrained geography inherently encouraged vertical thinking, and its status as a global financial capital meant that virtually everyone, from powerful banks to influential newspapers, desired their name to be visibly etched into the clouds. The elevator made the sky accessible. The steel skeleton made the sky buildable. Together, they didn't just change architecture. They fundamentally redefined what a city could truly be. Now, the vertical race would truly begin. Not outward, but dramatically upward. By the late 19th century, New York City was no longer content to merely sprawl. It passionately aspired to soar. The ground was already saturated. The streets were perpetually packed, and the only remaining direction for construction was upward. With steel frame construction and the safety elevator now firmly established, Manhattan transformed into a vibrant proving ground, and its burgeoning skyline became a literal battlefield for architectural ambition. The first monumental structures of this new era began to rise in the 1890s. In 1890, the New York World Building, serving as the headquarters for Joseph Pulitzer's newspaper empire, ascended 20 stories above Park Row. It briefly held the title of the tallest office building in the world. Not to be outdone, the Park Row building claimed the coveted title next in 1899, reaching an impressive height of 391 feet. Each new towering structure was a bold declaration, signifying not just immense wealth, but visionary foresight. To build higher was to unequivocally announce, "We represent the future." Soon, the skyline began to sprout with towering steel giants. The Singer Building, completed in 1908, stood at a remarkable 612 feet, becoming the tallest building in the world and the first structure to surpass the height of Trinity Church's spire, which had held the record for over 50 years. But even that record would prove fleeting. In 1913, the Woolworth Building seized the crown. Designed by architect Cass Gilbert and entirely funded in cash by retail magnate Frank W. Woolworth, it rose to a staggering 792 feet, encompassing over 55 stories, in a breathtaking display of neo-Gothic beauty. Nicknamed the Cathedral of Commerce, the Woolworth wasn't just tall. It was majestic, an architectural sermon proclaiming America's rise as a dominant modern power. But this wasn't merely architectural competition. It was intense branding warfare. Corporations and influential institutions fiercely vied for the tallest, most distinctive buildings, towers that would etch their names indelibly into the very sky. Every new height achieved generated a fresh headline. Every striking silhouette became a powerful symbol. The skyscraper evolved into the ultimate billboard, permanent, imposing, and utterly impossible to ignore. And beneath it all, the relentless rhythm of progress pounded on. Steam shovels dug deep foundations into Manhattan's granite bedrock. Riveters hammered steel day and night. Immigrants and ironworkers balanced precariously on steel beams hundreds of feet in the air, with no harnesses, only sheer grit and unwavering resolve. The skyline was no longer a theoretical concept. It was tangible, it was real, and it was powerfully ascending. As the 1920s roared through Manhattan, the skyline began to dance, not just to climb. This was the vibrant era of Art Deco, a time when architecture wasn't solely about height, but also profoundly about style. The Jazz Age infused elegance into steel and stone, and New York's buildings transformed into dynamic icons of movement, light, and pulsating energy. The most dazzling of them all was the magnificent Chrysler Building. Completed in 1930, it stood at an impressive 1,046 feet tall, briefly holding the title of the world's tallest building. Commissioned by car magnate Walter Chrysler, the tower was not merely a monument to corporate success. It was a dazzling symphony of design. Its gleaming stainless steel spire, ingeniously constructed in secret and hoisted into place overnight, shimmered in the sun like a regal crown. Ornamental eagles, meticulously modeled after hood ornaments, jutted from the corners like watchful guardians of the future. With its graceful curves, striking chevrons, and distinctive machine-age detailing, the Chrysler Building didn't just scrape the sky, it seduced it. But the vertical race was far from over. Just a few blocks away, another titan was rapidly ascending. the iconic Empire State Building. Completed in 1931, amidst the profound depths of the Great Depression, it soared to a staggering 1,250 feet, decisively stealing the title from Chrysler and retaining it for nearly 40 years. Constructed in an astonishingly swift 410 days, with thousands of dedicated workers laboring through relentless wind, snow, and pervasive steel dust, the Empire State wasn't just a building. It was a powerful message: New York endures. While much of the country grappled with economic hardship, Manhattan relentlessly pushed upward, and its buildings powerfully mirrored the era's dual identity. Elegant yet aggressive, optimistic yet fiercely competitive. The Art Deco style brilliantly captured the inherent contradictions of the time. Geometric yet graceful, modern yet deeply steeped in myth. Towers were no longer just functional. They were meticulously sculpted, glowing at night like majestic beacons of possibility. And yet, beneath all that glittering facade, a profound purpose existed. These towering skyscrapers were commissioned by powerful barons and moguls who desired more than mere profit. They yearned for legacy, a permanent, indelible place in the skyline and in history itself. By the close of the 1930s, Manhattan's unmistakable silhouette had firmly taken shape. The city was no longer just a capital of finance. It was a soaring cathedral of ambition, a skyline that didn't whisper progress. It boldly shouted it. After World War II, Manhattan's skyline entered a new phase, one less ornamental and significantly more corporate. The elegant flourishes of Art Deco gave way to stark glass, gleaming steel, and uncompromising straight lines. America had unequivocally emerged as a global superpower, and New York served as the bustling front office of that burgeoning empire. The skyline adapted accordingly, not with decorative spires, but with monuments of unadorned efficiency. In 1952, the United Nations headquarters rose majestically on the East River, a bold, rectilinear glass tower flanked by low marble wings. It signaled a distinct shift in tone: global, diplomatic, and decidedly futuristic. It wasn't just a building. It was an architectural statement about international order in the atomic age, and it effectively set the aesthetic tone for what would follow. Next came the Lever House in 1952 and the Seagram Building in 1958, both quintessential examples of the international style. These towers, with their innovative, curtain walls of reflective glass and minimalist steel frames, were designed with stark minimalism, completely free of extraneous decoration and stripped of sentiment. They didn't resemble cathedrals or castles. They looked like precision machines, exact, modern, and ruthlessly practical. The Seagram Building, meticulously designed by Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, proved particularly influential. Its distinctive bronze-tinted glass, uniform grid, and expansive open plaza introduced a novel kind of urban presence, not to impress with ornate flourishes, but to project an aura of order, discipline, and undeniable power. This represented corporate architecture at its zenith: cold, strikingly beautiful, and inherently authoritative. As businesses boomed, so too did the skyline. Midtown swiftly became the central hub for America's major corporations, powerful banks, influential media companies, and prestigious law firms. These new skyscrapers didn't compete for aesthetic beauty. They competed for maximum square footage, for prime location, and for an imposing presence on the horizon. Gone were the soaring spires and whimsical gargoyles. In their place stood mirrored monoliths, anonymous giants that reflected not just the clouds, but the burgeoning ambitions of Wall Street. And yet, in their silence and stark simplicity, these towering structures spoke volumes. They narrated the story of a country obsessed with relentless growth, unwavering precision, and cutting-edge modernity. They defined the corporate era, profoundly shaping the visual appearance and underlying feel of cities across the globe. But even amidst all this glass and steel, one truth remained constant. The skyline was still a powerful symbol. Only now, it whispered power rather than boldly shouted beauty. By the late 1960s, New York was already a vertical masterpiece, but it still possessed the capacity to dream even bigger. That dream began to materialize at the southern tip of Manhattan, where a pair of identical towers would soon transform the skyline forever. They were bold, controversial, and utterly unlike anything the world had ever witnessed. They were the iconic Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. Conceived as a central hub for global commerce, the World Trade Center project was meticulously overseen by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. Architect Minoru Yamasaki designed the buildings with a radical, minimalist approach. Stark vertical lines, sleek aluminum cladding, and no setbacks. Each tower would ascend over 1,360 feet, dwarfing every building that had preceded them. The ambition was not merely architectural. It was deeply ideological. A profound statement of global connectivity, a new temple dedicated to capitalism. Construction commenced in 1966. To make room, an entire vibrant neighborhood known as Radio Row was completely razed. The foundations necessitated a revolutionary engineering technique known as the slurry wall, enabling engineers to build deep into the soft riverbed while effectively holding back the mighty Hudson River. It represented one of the most challenging engineering feats of its era. When finally completed in 1973, the Twin Towers were not universally beloved. Some critics disparaged them as sterile or excessively boxy. Others mourned the loss of the ornate towers from the past. But to many, the towers embodied pure presence. Bold, supremely confident, and undeniably commanding. They didn't gracefully dance with the sky like the Chrysler Building. They didn't elegantly taper like the Empire State Building. They stood firm, twin pillars of unwavering certainty and monumental scale. More than mere buildings, the World Trade Center rapidly became an international symbol of business, of unity, and of American might. People flocked from around the world to visit the observation decks, to dine at windows on the world, or simply to gaze upward in awe from the plaza below. For nearly 3 decades, the Twin Towers utterly dominated Lower Manhattan. They anchored the skyline, imbuing it with symmetry and a profound sense of gravitas. And while other cities constructed taller structures, none carried the iconic weight and recognition of those 2 towers, majestically rising side by side. The skyline had once again undergone a profound transformation, this time not with ornament or artistry, but with monumental, uncompromising ambition. On the morning of September 11, 2001, the Manhattan skyline was irrevocably changed forever. Not by the deliberate work of cranes or construction, but by unforeseen violence and billowing smoke. In less than 2 agonizing hours, the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center catastrophically collapsed into dust, fire, and twisted steel. Thousands of precious lives were tragically lost, and the 2 iconic pillars that had once defined Lower Manhattan were utterly gone. The attack was not merely an assault on people or buildings. It was a direct assault on powerful symbols, on what those towers fundamentally represented: commerce, modernity, freedom, and ambition. For decades, the Twin Towers had visually defined the southern end of the island. Their clean, monolithic forms had become visual shorthand for New York itself. Now, that familiar skyline was fractured. In the days and weeks that followed, Lower Manhattan became a raw, open wound, smoldering and deeply scarred. Where once there had been immense height and brilliant light, there was now only a gaping absence. And that profound absence echoed. Photographs of the skyline appeared hollowed out. The once familiar silhouette was broken, and the very space that had once pulsed with global energy became tragically known as Ground Zero. For the first time in a century, Manhattan was not building upward. It was collectively mourning. The city grieved deeply, but it also resiliently endured. Steelworkers, firefighters, police officers, and countless volunteers poured into the site, not to construct, but to recover. Rubble was cleared. Lives were honored. Silence replaced the clang of iron. In a city always relentlessly rushing forward, this was a forced pause, a long breath held in collective pain. But even in profound sorrow, New York did what it had always done. It looked up. Discussions about rebuilding were complex, deeply emotional, and politically charged. What should take the place of the towers? Should anything rise again? Could the skyline possibly be restored without erasing the devastating loss? For years, the gaping hole in the ground remained, a stark reminder of what once was and what was violently taken. It became sacred space. And yet, slowly, meticulously, plans emerged. Designs were drafted. Cranes reappeared. Steel returned. Not to erase the tragedy, but to create something new, powerfully standing beside it. But before any new structure was fully built, one truth became crystal clear. The skyline was no longer just a symbol of power or ambition. It had transformed into a profound memorial, a silhouette shaped by both triumph and an enduring tragedy. And the story, far from being over, was continuing. In the aftermath of devastation, a city renowned for its speed, ambition, and relentless movement paused, not to surrender, but to fundamentally reimagine itself. Rebuilding the Manhattan skyline after September 11th wasn't merely a matter of architecture. It was a profound matter of identity. What would rise in place of the Twin Towers? Could anything truly fill that void? The answers emerged gradually. In 2003, a design by architect Daniel Libeskind was ultimately selected for the new World Trade Center site. It wasn't just about achieving new heights. It was fundamentally about healing, honoring memory, and fostering renewal. The ambitious plan would seamlessly blend commercial space with poignant public memorials, serene parks, efficient transportation hubs, and abundant light. It wasn't a return to what had been. It was a powerful statement of what could now be achieved. At the heart of it all stood a new, singular tower, One World Trade Center. Originally named the Freedom Tower, rising majestically from the northwest corner of Ground Zero, it would become the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere at an impressive 1,776 feet, a deliberately chosen number echoing the year of America's independence. But this wasn't solely about patriotism. It was a powerful act of defiance, about courageously reaching upward again despite the profound loss. Construction began in 2006, and in 2014, One World Trade Center officially opened its doors. Clad in shimmering glass and standing like a magnificent crystal obelisk, it didn't attempt to imitate the past. It offered something entirely new, reflection, both literal and deeply symbolic. The building subtly changes with the sky, glowing, darkening, even seemingly disappearing depending on the light. It embodies presence without arrogance. Beside it, the poignant 9/11 memorial opened in 2011. Two deep, recessed voids where the original towers once stood, each featuring a continuous waterfall cascading into a central pool, and the names of the fallen meticulously etched into bronze. It's not just a part of the skyline. It's now an integral part of the city's very soul. The new skyline took years to fully materialize. Other towers gracefully rose, 3 WTC, 4 WTC, and 7 WTC, each one sleek, modern, and purposeful. Together, they represent not just a city rebuilt, but a city profoundly transformed. New York didn't simply replace what was lost. It evolved. It honored the past while ambitiously building for the future. And in doing so, it powerfully reminded the world of something deeply American and profoundly human. You can knock a city down, but you cannot keep it from rising again. Today, the Manhattan skyline is far more than a mere collection of buildings. It is a living, breathing symbol of unyielding ambition, of profound resilience, and of the American dream itself. No other silhouette in the world carries such immense weight and recognition. It's indelibly etched into pop culture, history, and collective memory. You can sketch it with just 5 lines, and people will instantly recognize it. It tells a compelling story, a narrative of bold engineers and fearless ironworkers, of visionary architects who imagined spires that would pierce the clouds, and of countless immigrants who bravely crossed oceans to help construct them. It speaks volumes of risk, reward, and constant reinvention, the very essence of New York itself. It has never been truly finished, and it never will be. The skyline is vibrantly alive, perpetually changing and reaching for new heights. In recent years, it's stretched even higher, but not in Lower Manhattan. This time, the vertical race has shifted uptown. Along Billionaire's Row, super slender residential towers like 432 Park Avenue, Central Park Tower, and 111 West 57th Street now ascend like needles piercing the sky above Midtown. These modern skyscrapers represent extraordinary feats of engineering, pencil-thin, rigorously wind-tested, and primarily designed for the ultra-wealthy. Critics label them as sky-piercing manifestations of inequality. Others view them as genuine marvels of modern ambition. Meanwhile, in Hudson Yards, an entirely new neighborhood has emerged, featuring gleaming glass towers, striking public art installations, and corporate headquarters rising where vast rail yards once sprawled. The skyline now extends significantly farther west, continuously evolving with the city's changing needs and aspirations. But even as it grows and transforms, the skyline tenaciously holds onto its past. The Empire State Building still glows majestically at night. The Chrysler Building still gleams brilliantly at sunrise. And One World Trade Center stands solemnly and proudly. The skyline remembers what came before, even as it boldly reaches for what comes next. More than any single monument or individual statue, it is the collective skyline that truly defines New York. Not just in its physical form, but in its profound meaning. It is a place where humanity dared to build upward, repeatedly, through periods of economic booms, devastating busts, global wars, and deep wounds. A city of millions, powerfully reflected in steel and glass. It doesn't merely mark where the city ends. It vividly marks where dreams begin. Because in Manhattan, the sky has never been the ultimate limit. It's simply the next floor,